Okay, this video is going to be about recording music into a computer, such as a Mac, but could be anything. I know I've done this sort of video before, transferring vinyl to a computer for a digital transfer. I was rushed by, I think, the 10-minute limit or something that they used to have at the time. There's an awful lot to talk about, and I think I focused quite a lot on the hardware side of things and how to set that up in the last video. Here I want to really talk about what you're supposed to do at the end once it's into your machine. All right, I will briefly recap what I said before, plus I'll also put a link to the last video in there because there's a little drawing that I did which might also help with the hardware setup. Okay, so we are here open now on a new project in Logic Express. So I want an audio, I want a stereo track. Now I'm using Logic Express here. It's a bit of overkill for this sort of thing. Audacity or GarageBand or something like that will probably do just as well. There are a couple of little idiosyncrasies in Logic Express which make it perhaps slightly more awkward to do this sort of thing. But bear in mind, it's not actually meant for this sort of thing. It's it's still very good. So the first thing is that in Logic Express, you haven't really got any way of adjusting the recording level as it's coming in, which is why I showed you in the last video that I had a mini disc player connected into the thing, not to actually play any mini discs on it, but just because it has a way of turning the output level right down, which for vinyl is very important because any aggressive clicks and pops and things like that will go over the 0 decibels recording limit. And if I just zoom in a little bit here, this is what I mean here. This 0 decibels limit here mustn't be exceeded at all. Okay, and some clicks, especially if you've got an older record or a rather knackered one, will do that. Okay, so I find that by reducing the level by about 12 decibels is actually very good. It will provide a very quiet signal, but once it's in, you can actually sort that out. Okay, so then what I want to do is make sure that in my settings box, I'm going to go to audio here. All right, now it's already by default, because it's Logic Express, it's already set for 24-bit recording. 24-bit is better than CD quality. CD quality is 16-bit. It's basically how accurate the number is that your music is converted to. It converts, a CD converts music to numbers, 16-digit numbers, binary, in a binary code, 44,100 times per second, which sounds an awful lot, but it isn't actually really. And even in those days when they were deciding on the CD standard, digital equipment was capable of doing better. It's just that they were rushed and somebody plucked 1644 out of thin air and then hardware had to cope with it. All right. The trouble is that digital recording by default creates a very high frequency signal, which could, if not dealt with properly, could actually be heard. And at 44.1 kilohertz, i.e. 44,100 times per second, you needed some sort of filter to, and a fairly sort of aggressively working type filter to filter out that sound before, you know, people could play their CDs, right? And CD hardware had to cope with that. I'm going to turn this up to 88, which pushes that high frequency signal. I said I'm going to turn that up to 88. And that will push that high frequency signal up much higher, so the human ear isn't really aware of it. Shouldn't be aware of it at 44.1, but for some reason we are. All right, so now it needs a much less aggressive filtering to get rid of that high frequency sound. That's putting it into layman's terms, and I only understand layman's terms. So if I'm not entirely right about that, then don't shoot me. All right, so anyway, I've set it to 4488. The reason why I haven't gone to 96 and done a 2496 recording is because in the processing afterwards, it can take a long time. 88 is a trade-off between quality and the time it takes to actually process the recording afterwards. All right. Last thing I'm going to do, because this is set up to record musical instruments and people actually playing music, you might want a metronome clicking while you're doing that. Well, actually, no, we don't. Okay, because we're just playing an album. Now, the album that I'm going to transfer is actually by the Pet Shop Boys. I don't want you to hear it because I want to monetize this video. So I'm going to switch off the recording now and just play my record into into Logic. Okay, so now I've got the album played into Logic. And the remainder of this video is really now saying, well, what do you do once it's in Logic? Because, or into any other software like Audacity or GarageBand or whatever it is you're using. Okay, we've got to get it into a format that a CD player or an iPod or an MP3 player can understand. All right, and this involves taking this hugely long signal now. See, it's going on for hundreds of musical bars here. I'm not going to scroll all the way through that. Yeah. Oh, sugar, what have I just done there? Oh, yes. Right. So, yeah. Also, it looks like we've got no signal here. We actually have, if I do this, you'll see. Right, we've got hundreds of musical bars, and we need to actually chop it up now into songs, get those songs into a format that iTunes can understand, and I'll be dealing with iTunes because it is pretty much, most people have got it. So yeah, if you use another thing like Windows Media Player or something, then some of the procedures here will be slightly different, and I'll point it out as we go along. All right, so all this stuff here, where there's wiggles on the line, is a signal. All right, it's very quiet at the moment because, as I said, we recorded it at a much lower level than the music actually is. All right, now I'm playing along here now. That's where the record hit the stylus hit the record. All right, and that's the beginning. Whoops. So round about there, that's where I want to split and get rid of this bit here, because we don't need to hear the record hitting or the stylus hitting the record. All right, and I like to just drag it back a little bit so that I can see more of the signal here, because I'm like that. All right, now I need to go to a fader tool here. Oops, and I'm going to drag that so that we don't get an abrupt beginning. All right, so I'm going to do that on every song. All right, now I'm going to find the end of this song. Right, as I said, it's pretty easy just to look at the signal and see, look here where the line goes thinner, that's where the music fades out. You've got to be a bit careful because sometimes if you've got very quiet signal, it will look very sort of straight line anyway. Right. Hopefully, if I talk over this a bit, then hopefully it won't be picked up by the copyright police. Okay. Oops. Right, so that's where that finishes. That's where the first song finishes. So I'm going to split that there. So it sort of cuts it in two. All right. Okay, that is roughly where there's no signal again, so that's like the in-between parts on the record. I want to get rid of that. I don't do anything else to get rid of cracks and popples. There is software that will try and get rid of all your crackles and pops for you. It has to be used with a lot of care, otherwise it can have an awful sort of phasing in and phasing out effect on the music. Plus you're also, at the very least, you're cutting down on some of the ambience that's on these records, and I just like to leave it as much intact as I possibly can. Alright, so now I'm going to fade this out earlier so that you don't hear any of the, or many, or as many of the crackles on the way out. Okay, and that's all I'm going to do. Alright. Oops, I don't want to play any music. Alright, so that's track 1 here. Okay, and it's called One More Chance. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I need to now get track 1 into iTunes. And first of all, what I'll do, while it's selected, if I go back to my pointer tool here, if I double click on the file, it brings up another menu here, and I'm going to choose Functions and Normalise. Now what Normalise does is it brings the very loudest beats right up to 0 decibels. That's not the same as loudness war compression. Loudness war compression would cut those loud beats and make them quieter, and then you'd bring the whole lot up to like the very loudest bit, and that's destructive. Alright, so all we're doing is just dragging the whole thing up so that the loudest bits don't go anywhere near the distortion level. And this is where, as I said, when we chose our sampling rate, 44.1 kilohertz would be rather quick here. If I chose 96, which I have done before, it takes an awful long time, and on my laptop that I had once, the hard disk drive actually found it too much to cope with, and for some reason or other my hard disk decided to die on me while this was going on. Alright, so 88.2 is a nice moderate sort of compromise between that, okay, because you can see it's actually processing samples here, and here it's telling you how many squillions of samples it's got to do, and you can watch it go down if you're that kind of exciting person. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can see how exciting I am, and it's done it. Okay, and there's the signal at its the loudest it can be without it going into distortion. All right, the thick line here is the average loudness levels, and the spiky lines are peaks, and that's usually drum beats on pop records. And you can see that this hasn't been over loudness ward, and there's plenty of dynamic range here, plenty of louds and quiets and things like that. All right, so now we need to get that into iTunes. All right, so iTunes, we have to bounce. Now in Logic Express, because it's actually recording software, you might have a song and it's got 16 tracks of audio and MIDI information and various vocals and what have you, and you want to get that. It's the bouncing bit compresses that down to 2 tracks, not destructively again, but just sort of records it all to 2 tracks, and then you have some various options here. Now we don't need to do a full bounce, so it'll be quite quick. All right, first of all, here I type the title, One More Chance. Now I'm going to choose Apple Lossless here, but if you want full CD quality, you can choose PCM, and then you can choose between WAV or AIF, right, both of which iTunes can understand. Uses up a lot of hard disk space though, and I'm running short on that. So I'm going to choose Apple Lossless, which is easy. Again, it's a compromise. It's supposed to not lose any information. It probably does a little bit, but it's not too bad. All right, you can choose MP3 if you wish. Okay, and you can choose the bit rate at which you want to do that. On the Apple Lossless bit, I think, yeah, you can choose AAC, which is like the iTunes download standard from the iTunes store. And again, it's not quite so good as Apple Lossless. All right. you need to make sure that add to iTunes library is ticked. I don't need to normalise it because I've just done that. Including audio tail I think is probably quite a good thing to do. Alright, so now I just choose bounce. Okay. Because I've put the title in, I'll have half a chance of being able to find it in my iTunes library, which is absolutely huge. It's probably something like 80 or 90 gigabytes or something like that, given that I've only got 120 gigabyte iPod, I think. Is it 120 or 160? Might be 160. I've certainly used up an awful lot of hard disk space. Alright, that's converting it to Apple lossless now. See, it wasn't that quick. Now, when we go into iTunes, I'm going to go to, if I can find it, recently added. Okay. Scroll down here, and I find one more chance. Okay. Now, right-clicking gives me the opportunity to get info. You can also do that by pressing Command and the I key, or Control and the I key if you're in Windows, I think. All right. On the Info tab, we've already got our title because I put that in Logic. My artist is the Pet Shop Boys. It knows, it can guess the Pet Shop Boys because I've got other tracks in by the Pet Shop Boys. Put the year in, 1987. The album artist is sometimes quite useful to put in. I just put it in anyway. It's track number 1 of 10. And the album is called Actually. And the genre, I'm just going to put pop for that. Okay. If you... Oh, interesting. I think that's possibly because... Oh, I've misspelled actually there. I'll change that in a second. Actually. There we go. Yeah, if you look here, there used to be a lot of options that you could choose from there. Oh, here they are. It's just not so easy to scroll up and scroll down. All right, but you can just type in the genre that you want. And we just click OK, and we're there. All right, that's that track done. All right, then we go back to Logic Express, and we do exactly the same thing I did here with all the other tracks. Okay, I'll just remind you very quickly if I work quite fast here. All right, I need the fade tool. Fade up a little bit. Find the end of this track. Find the end of this track, says he. Might be around about there. Split. I think I've actually jumped 2 tracks here in my haste. More haste, less speed, but I'll split that one anyway. Let's just... Yeah, I have, look. Alright. Alright, because we've got what have I done to deserve this here. Okay, I'm trying not to play too much music. Split here, so stop and split. Select it first and split. This is now because I'm trying to do it quickly. It's actually quite a laborious task, but it's worth doing it because you do get a very good transfer at the end of it. Alright, and then I try and make my fade out sort of pretty much where it looks like it's starting to fade out anyway. Okay, I need to normalise that selection. How exciting. It'll have finished in a minute, peoples. It will have finished in a minute, peoples. we go. Alright, so this is what have I done to deserve this. And I'm going to bounce it. Alright, see my Apple lossless is already set. Alright, so I need to type the title in again. Otherwise, Logic gives it a stupid thing like in, out or something like that. Or it'll rename it after the last song that you did. Okay, what have I done to deserve this? And bounce, converting it to Apple lossless. In a second, it'll put it into the iTunes library. That's done. Nip to the tunes. Okay, I'm already on recently added. There's what have I done to deserve this. Command I or right click and get info. Change that back to a question mark. Pop in the information. Pet Shop Boys. Pet Shop Boys. 1987. This is track 2 of 10. The album is Actually. Alright, now it's got Actually because I've typed it in before. Genre is pop. And just click OK. Alright, now I'm going to pause again while I do the rest of the album and then I'll come back to you because there's something else rather neat that you can do. Okay, so now we have taken all our 10 tracks that are on this album. They've all been cut up, they've all been normalised, they've all been bounced into iTunes, and they've all had their information typed in on the Get Info page. So now we're really finished with this file, and it's to save hard disk space because otherwise you'll have it twice. You'll have the album in iTunes and you'll have it in Logic, although the Logic one's a better quality file. You can safely delete the Logic file, alright? I'm not going to do that this second though. I'll have a purge of it one day when I feel like getting some hard disk space back. Alright, so I can click out of there. I'll save that, I suppose. Alright, and here I have my album from Actually down to King's Cross. This is in the recently added section. Right, I shouldn't have done that because I'll show you something else. We want to be able to find it in iTunes, and iTunes libraries can get rather unwieldy. So, starting with track 1, going down to track 10, click, shift and click. That selects all of those tracks. File, new playlist from selection. Now, puts on my playlist list, which is still getting rather big, the album. Okay, so there it is in a playlist. That can now be burnt to CD. Now if, oh whoops daisy, if you have any sort of leanings towards hi-fi quality or anything like that, the best thing to do now is to select File and burn playlist to disk. Right, and then play it on a decent CD player. The sound card in the iMac is not good, and really and truthfully, if you want to play it from the iMac, then it's worth investing in some of the sort of more modern sort of server system things where you know, get a DAC, a proper outboard DAC, and do it like that, because this is really no good, and it certainly doesn't have the immediacy and presence of the vinyl recording in the slightest. All right, so burn the playlist to disk. All right. What I'm going to do before I do anything like that, because I also want to be able to play this on the way to work in the morning. So I've got my phone connected here because I've left my iPod at work. My iPhone 4 doesn't have anything like the sound quality as my as my iPod. By the way, my iPod Classic. Get an iPod Classic. It's good. Don't let Apple phase it out, please. So what do I want to do? Yes. Select them all again. Advanced. Get album artwork. Now that will hunt the iTunes store. Now actually is a very popular album. It will still be available on iTunes. This was #1 for however many lifetimes that it was #1 for. Alright, so now it's going to hunt through, it's going to find the album on iTunes, and it's going to paste in the artwork here. So we'll give it a moment or two to do that. It can take a little while. It's actually checking my whole iTunes library to see if there's any artwork that it can add. And apparently there are 718 albums worth of stuff on my library. We'll find it eventually. And yes, you did see the word Womble in there. The Wombles was the first album that I ever bought. And I've still got it. And there we go. Couldn't get the artwork for some albums, but it's found the artwork for Actually. And there we go, peoples. You can actually print out that cover. I've shown you how to do that before. Again, make sure it's selected. Choose Print. CD, dual case insert. Choose a single cover. And there we go. And that'll print out a CD cover for you. It won't be the proper artwork, but it's better than nothing. Okay, right, now I really will say goodbye.